Welcome to Series 2 of the Kyero Pro Podcast, the podcast for estate agencies and business owners in Spain. With me is the infamous Alfredo.
Hi, Martin. I'm Alfredo Bloy-Dawson. I'm architect consultant and the general man about town to do real estate. So thanks for letting me join you.
It's a pleasure. Always welcome to brainstorm stuff with you. I'm Martin Dell, one of the founders of Kyero.com. And in this season, we're talking about AI, but probably not in a way that you've heard it discussed before. Alfredo and I are both very curious and very confused by the topic. And this podcast is our opportunity to get the guests and the experts on that we want to grill and ask the questions about. We're coming at this in a completely new way, and we're coming at it with three basic assumptions. The first one is the AI genie is not going back in the bottle. This is happening. Tasks will be automated by AI. That's a given. Given it's not going back in the bottle, the number two sort of premise is you can't automate the process that doesn't exist. So automation's great, but if you don't have a process already, AI is not going to help you. So that's something nobody's saying. And the third assumption is that the person currently running your processes is the expert in the room, not your AI consultant, not me, not Alfredo. It's the person currently running the process, and they're the person currently most threatened by AI. So those three things. That's a lot to get your head around. And to help us think about all those things, we've got an amazing guest who's got a background in change management, and not just as a consultant. She's been there and done it. Harriet Beveridge, co-author of the book, Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? A best-selling book about the story of how an underperforming British rowing crew went from finishing 7th or 8th to actually winning Olympic gold at the Sydney 2000 Games. The book, Will It Make the Boat Go Faster, has become something of a business classic in performance and leadership circles. And a brand new third updated edition is due to be published on June the 18th. But Harriet is not just an author. No, that would be too easy. She's also an executive coach with over 20 years of experience of helping businesses and individuals. And she cut her teeth in career management as a consultant at Ernst & Young. But that's not enough. She's also a stand-up comedian who's performed at the Edinburgh Fringe. I'm already feeling like an underperformer here. Have I left anything out, Harriet?
Oh, bless you. No, that sounds, I'm a bit of I do lots of different things.
The reason we wanted to have Harriet kick off this second series of the Kyero Pro podcast is that the conversation that's not being had about AI is the cultural and organizational implications. And we think Harriet is just the best person to help us get our minds around this and not get caught up in whether this tech or that tech is going to rule the world. So with that said and done, welcome to the show, Harriet.
Thanks for having me along. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Where to start? Perhaps you could give us a bit of an overview about the book and how it came about and what the central premise is.
Yeah, sure. So, hilariously, I am not remotely sporty. I was that child who was last to be picked for any kind of sporting team back at school. And then it was in my mid-20s that I joined a new company. I was going to be a performance coach. And there was a new guy who joined at the same time who turned out to be an Olympic gold medalist. So I was really quite mean, I think, and rude. And I was like, well done in the sporting arena, but what's the relevance to us in the real world? And surprise, surprise, the more I spoke to him, the more I realised there's loads of transferable strategies. So in the book, he tells the story of going from that mediocrity to gold medal. And I do the kind of, so what, how can we use this? What are the strategies around focus, goals, change? And I think fundamentally with the AI conversation, it's about change, right? It's about change. So what can we learn from a crew that did radical change in the space of 2 years?
Amazing. And that was 15 years ago the book came out?
15 years ago, yeah. So we are super lucky. It's become a bit of a catchphrase, will it make the boat go faster, in the business community. So yeah, hence the third edition, which is kind of updated and sharper and essentialized.
Nice. I remember reading the book way early in the journey of Kyero. So, and I think that phrase, "Will it make the boat go faster?" really helped it stick. It's like,
Yeah, exactly.
what are we trying to do? What's the goal here?
Because you can get so wrapped up, and I think like you talk about AI as like, oh, which platform and which is it, Claude or is it ChatGPT or da 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 da. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. What are we trying to do here? What's actually going to make the boat go faster? And I love that phrase because it cuts through a lot of noise. How many meetings are you in, or how many conversations, or how often do we look at our inbox and we just get kind of busy? And it's like, no. What's the point here? What are we trying to achieve?
Yeah. And I think that's what's happening in the world of AI now, as you say. Alfredo earlier on was talking about, looking at TikTok, and Claude just killed the graphics industry, or ChatGPT just killed Claude. And it's like, what's it for? What are we actually trying to fix here?
100%. I mean, in sort of techie speak, it's like, what's the use case? Are you trying to cut costs? Are you trying to build revenue? Are you trying to simplify processes? So for everyone listening here, it's kind of like, what's your strategic goal? What's your overall goal in the next 2-3 years? And then AI should be in service of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's one of our sort of basic premises, that the conversation around AI is missing the conversation of what are we actually trying to do? Are we trying to cut cost? Are we trying to be better performing? Are we trying to increase conversion rate? Without knowing what we're trying to achieve, it's pretty hard to hit that goal.
Exactly. Yeah.
Going back to the rowing team that were coming in 7th or 8th consistently, and then this idea of aligning them with a common goal, did everybody come along willingly? Was everybody aligned right from the beginning, or was that a bit of a herding cats moment?
Because you'd think, when I assumed when I first met Ben Hunt Davis, I assumed, well, you're a great rower, of course you'd want to win a gold medal. And he was like, no, because actually in Britain at the time, we had a really good crew of 4. And anyone else, and to be fair, in the 1996 Olympics, Britain came 36th in the medal table. We got 1 gold medal. So our whole strategy was like, anything we can do to make this boat with 4 of them in win, great. So everyone else was just kind of like, if you can become an Olympian, that would be amazing. That's as good as it's going to get, lads. Calm down. So in the crew that Ben was with, which was the 8 crew, there were people who were just excited to represent their country, and that was it. Others who wanted to, make the Olympic final. Others who wanted to win gold. And in the wider team of not just the rowers, you'd got the physiotherapists and the nutritionists and doctors and managers, yada yada. Some of them just wanted to do some good physiotherapy, and or do some good nutrition. They weren't really. So there was a big conversation to get everyone around. Let's aim for gold. And are we all up for it? Because once you've got that clarity, then that question, will it make the boat go faster? It's like, that was the key question, because they needed to be the fastest in the world.
Wow. And that's really interesting. I had assumed that if you were on an Olympic team, then you were there to win gold.
Yeah. And they talked about it being their crazy goal, because a lot of the rowing community said, look, don't be silly. It's not possible. If you could aim for being 5th or 4th, that would be amazing. So let's just, and what I really like about the story is they said, okay, that absolutely is crazy. I get that. Can we at least spend a few minutes going, wouldn't it be amazing if, and figuring out what we really want, and then figuring out the how. And I don't think we do that. I think in the business world, we, quite often we panic and go, what's realistic, or what's everyone else doing and what's realistic, rather than going, okay, wouldn't it be amazing if, and then kind of going, okay, well, if we wanted that, how would we do that? I think that's quite an interesting conversation to have, but we don't have it because we don't want to look foolish, right?
Yeah, that's what sprang to my mind immediately, was the whole loss aversion thing. It's like, well, if I shoot for the moon and I miss, then I look daft.
Yeah, exactly. And okay, in the business world, it might be, okay, well, what resources are we going to put behind it, and what's the cost of failure? And sure. There's, but quite often, if you shoot for the, what's that expression? If you shoot for the moon, you might reach the stars. That, okay, well, does it really matter? And quite often when you set those challenging goals, it provokes a different type of thinking. It provokes a different way of working that unlocks something quite special.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about a business owner in Spain having this sort of AI conversation with his team, and they might be all pro AI, and this is a great opportunity for all of us. But in the background, people are also hearing Meta or Microsoft just laying off tens of thousands of people.
Sure.
So when the rowing team was having that conversation about winning gold, were there people actively skeptical in there as well, going, we're never going to win gold? Or there was resistance?
Absolutely. And I mean, there's lots of kind of things we can talk about. There's something about the building belief of, can we actually do that? And they worked quite hard, and we share in the book, strategies around building belief. And I found that really reassuring, that even as elite athletes, they had to work on that. They had belief wobbles. They had even when they were actually at Sydney, at the Sydney Olympic, Village. They talk about one night, one of the lads go, I can't do it. And they had strategies around building belief. So belief is one thing. And then there was the desire. And I think in the business world, especially, if you run your own business, it's obvious to you why you want to do it. You've got a real reason for it. And I think as leaders, we sometimes are guilty of almost like being an entertainer off at the front, going like, come on, this is going to be great. And try and motivate people. And that's all good. But how often do we actually step into their shoes, our people's shoes, and go, what genuinely motivates them? And if I genuinely know that, then I can help them to link this goal we've got in 3 years' time, 2 years' time. Why is it of value to you? As agents, right? When you're selling people a property, yes, of course you have to do that. Oh, isn't it great? And da. Of course you do. But you've got to understand your customers' needs, right? If they want a seaside view and you're going like, hey, what about, centre of, Almeria or whatever, that's not going to cut it, right? You've got to understand their. So I think, in terms of alignment around that goal, we can talk about belief and also around desire of like why people genuinely want it, and also that clarity of like, what's it going to take to get there.
That's really interesting. What I kind of heard in amongst there is that as an agent, the empathy I have to have for my clients, I also have to develop the same kind of empathy for my colleagues and employees.
100%. And I think it's a skill that we already have. You wouldn't be a successful agent if you didn't have that kind of ability to interrogate and understand, what does my customer really need? It's exactly the same deal with our employees. 100%.
I think there is a point to raise here. I was talking about the mindset of the teams, and that is that there are companies and agencies in different stages, different positions within the market. So you have a lot of them that are in a strong position. They're quite happy with how they've done. They're successful, maybe they're top 10, and they see it as a threat because they're already at top. So they may well see it as, this is a protective, defensive thing, that what do we need to do to keep our position, and what's going to give these under-resourced newer agencies that shouldn't be in the top 10 an even playing field to beat us at it. And I think that plays a lot of the element of exhaustion, mental exhaustion from that, is the people at the sort of top part of the existing established and successful agencies that weren't looking for a solution per se. They weren't looking to make the needle go faster or the boat go quicker. They just want to stay in the position they were in. You know what I mean? And it's a different thing, different place that they're coming from, as well as their teams.
Yeah, that's interesting. With the rowing example, I wonder whether the people who are on sort of favourites to win gold, whether they were looking at the British team and going, hey, what are they doing? Or we need to step up our game.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess, listeners to this will be in different places, right? That some will feel very established and some will feel, be much smaller and growing and so on. And I think that, the crew view change as like, it's inevitable. If we win a race today, can we use the same tactics to win the race tomorrow or next week? Probably not. Even the Olympic heats, they changed their tactics between the heats and the final. And they tried something quite new, and because they knew that what had won, it wasn't what had won them the fastest losers race to get into the final wasn't going to win them the final. So it's that constant, like, what's going to help us win in the future. And they trained themselves. And when I first came across this, it sounded quite cheesy, but it makes so much sense to always find the useful. In whatever was going on, let's find the useful. I can't remember which race it was, but there was a race where I think the Dutch won the semi-final, and then between then and the final, the wind completely changed, the wind direction, and it's quite a big deal, right? If you're rowing, you've got a crosswind or a headwind or a tailwind, and they talked about the Dutch kind of going, "Oh God, everything's changed!" And they lost the final before they even started the final. So the British crew started to train themselves to kind of go, like, look, like, there's always something useful here. How do we find it? Like with AI, it's here. It's here. We can't go la la la, it's not here. It is here. So what's the useful? So whether I'm an established agency or a new agency or a big agency or a small agency, what's useful here? How can I use this? With the crew, we've just lost a race. Well, we'd love to have won it, but actually what's good about this is we've now got more data. The opposition next time will underestimate us. So let's use that. What's useful here? What's useful here? How can we use it?
Yeah, I like that. I like that as an idea. And like you say, I've read a number of things, a number of AI commentators, whether they're pro AI or anti it, but they all agree that the AI genie is not going back in the bottle. It's here. Tasks will be automated. These are just the rules of the game now. But that sort of aversion to change or being defensive, I think, is a common thing in business. If I'm already number one, well, I don't want to lose that. And I wonder what the mindset is about. So what's stopping businesses or people, I guess, from embracing change, even when they don't want it, even when they'd much rather that there was status quo?
I think it comes down to being very personal of what's in it for me, and whether I'm a leader of a business and I am going, oh, it's great, things are working well, and I don't want to lose that. Or I am perhaps a junior, perhaps admin person going, I'm really worried about my job. So I think it comes back to, that clarity of what's the goal. What do we use things for? Are we actually going to use AI to increase our conversion rate? Because you were telling me some interesting stats, Martin, about the kind of, was it that, immediately you only convert a certain number statistically, but actually if you stick with them and you follow up, you're much more likely to convert over the next 6 months, year, whatever. Yeah. So so actually that's, what's in it. It's the what's in it for me. So either as a leader or as an admin person, wherever anyone is in the company. And I think, again, it's being really, really clear and honest about what people genuinely want. So, it could be that we as leaders go like, hey, I'm going to automate this process, and that dull job you've got, don't worry, because I've now got a much more interesting job for you. And poor old Jose is sitting there going, I don't want a more interesting job. I've got, young kids at home, and I'm barely sleeping at night, and I just want to turn up and, do a good job and go home. So I think there's something about being, really, really clear on what people want, and also understanding the difference between what they want and what they're worried about. And it could be, well, actually, maybe Jose would be up for a more interesting kind of looking after the system type job if they had support, or if you could build their belief that it was possible, or, if they had some, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that defensiveness, it's just being really personal about genuinely what's in it for me.
So earlier on, Harriet, you mentioned this idea of building belief and that belief has to be built. Can you tell us some more about that and maybe some practical tips of how that actually gets done?
Yeah, sure. Because as I say, I've just done an MSc actually in neuroscience and psychology, and I was absolutely fascinated that for most of us, our default setting is to be worried about something. Like, oh, what's the risk here? What's the danger? Because, when thousands of years ago, that was really helpful to assume the worst, but maybe not so useful now. So it's almost like we have to kind of level the playing field and work quite hard on, we can do this. So one of the techniques the crew used was they had what they called an evidence wall. So literally they'd walk into their boat shed in the morning, full day's training ahead. And they knew that was the time when you're at your most vulnerable. That's when you're most likely to think, why are we doing this? What's the point? I've got a full day of hard effort ahead of me and we're never going to win gold. So they'd walk in and literally there was a wall with reasons why we can win gold. And there would be examples from role models. There was an Australian crew, for example, who shouldn't have won in 1992 because they were physically smaller, but they did. Their technique was amazing. Their tactics were amazing. So picture of those guys. There was statistics. So look, we're the progress we're making. We're not quite there yet with our stroke technique or our physical strength or whatever it was, but look, we're moving in the right direction. And sometimes it was written things from their debriefs. So it might be, well, we lost that particular race, but that 1,000 meters in the race, our rhythm was amazing. So if we could just do a bit more of that. So can you imagine, you walk in, you're feeling like, ooh, and then you go, we can win because, brrr, and suddenly you're like, I think we've got this. I think we can do it. So I use it a lot with my executive coaching clients. So I've got loads of, CEOs, senior folks who might have it on their phone, their own personal evidence wall. So they're going into a punchy meeting or, and they can look and go, you've got this because, and it's a very personal thing. Also work with a lot of leadership teams where it's an ongoing conversation that they'll have, a weekly evidence wall meeting. And it might be a physical wall or it might be a virtual whiteboard, that they do virtually to kind of like all put up virtual sticky Post-it notes of like, what wins have we got this week? What more evidence have we got? So I think that is a brilliant technique you can use individually or collectively to build your beliefs around your goals.
Amazing. I really like that idea. And of course, the stuff that isn't on the evidence wall is almost 100% fear and, oh my God, we're all going to die. So you kind of have to counteract that with something a bit more pragmatic maybe and inspiring.
Yeah, exactly. I think I love the fact that the evidence wall is so pragmatic, and it's not just believe. It's not some kind of like 80s, 90s sort of tragic pop song. There's substance to it. There's evidence behind it, which is very useful.
You also mentioned earlier on, in conjunction with building belief, building desire. Are there any techniques for that you can point us at?
I mean, it's as simple as asking folks what motivates you, what, in British language, what floats your boat. And if people don't know, then there's plenty of on the web. You can, lists of what are typical drivers, typical motivators, and get people to pick from a list, or to ask them, when's a time over the last year that you felt really on fire, really motivated, and that's a good clue. What was showing up then, and so you get people to almost have their list of the 5 key motivators, and then go, okay, this change, our strategic goal in the next 2-3 years is meaningful to you because how does it link to that stuff? And I remember working with a manufacturing client, and their company goal was all about revenue. They were in survival mode basically, and all the shift managers talked about why that was important for them personally. And for some of them, it was around, well, I'm ambitious. I want this factory to thrive so that my career thrives. For some of them, it was, I want to put food on the table. And that's a huge motivator. For some people, it was I value relationships, and this is a really good team, and we've got a good buzz here. So they were all linked to the same goal, but for quite different reasons. But it was genuine. There were literally people getting quite kind of emotional about like actually why this was important. And it turned it from this kind of just number on a page to something really meaningful for everyone.
That rings so many bells. I mean, a few years ago, for the Kyero team, we went through a process of using Simon Sinek's Find Your Why. And it was exactly that. People had individual whys, and they weren't mutually exclusive. They were kind of, they combined to build towards the main why.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, the Olympic crew did it. So I love the story about, there was a guy who drove the boat from race to race. Like if you've got a race in Germany, you've got to drive the boat from London to Germany. And they got to a point where if you said to him, what are you doing? He said, I'm driving towards Olympic gold. He had that clarity that, his contribution was crucial. If I don't get the boat there, they can't row. Yeah. So, and then why are you doing it? You're not going to get a medal. You're a volunteer. You're not going to get paid. Oh, great story to tell the grandchildren. How cool is that, right? He knew the what and the why. Perfect.
One of the reasons Alfredo and I have chosen AI for this series of the podcast is that we're both really interested in it and at the same time overwhelmed by it. There's just too much to take in. It's quite hard to make sense of, and this rate of change can be quite overwhelming. Do you have any experience of that level of change in the Olympic team?
Yeah, I mean, they only had 2 years to transform from 7th in the world to Olympic gold medalist. It wasn't like, oh, we're not ready for the Sydney Games. Could you just put it off a bit? No, it was going to be the date it was. And there's a few things. Number one, they had this phrase, control the controllables. There's so much stuff outside our control. Regulations kept changing. They had to be really careful about what medication they took. If you had a cold or flu and you took the wrong medication, you could get banned for life. It's like, you can't stop that. It's regulation. Control the controllables. Make sure you know what the deal is. They couldn't control the weather conditions. They, couldn't control what the competitors were going to do. But they started to write a list of like, what can we control? Or at least what can we influence? We can influence, how much sleep we get, what we eat, how we look after ourselves, our physicality. And the more you write down that list of what we can control, the more powerful you feel, the less out of control you feel. So I think there's that mindset piece about controlling the controllables. And also they just got really, really curious. And I love that phrase because it's so easy to get judgmental or worried, right? Like, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing the right? No one knows. No one knows. I'm old enough to remember year 2000, when we all thought the world was going to end because of the computer year 2000 bug, the dot-com boom, when, there was crazy companies starting up and it was almost like, like you've got to have the right tech. So I'm old enough and ugly enough to remember, even COVID, like some people going like, oh, it'll be over by Christmas, and some people going, it'll be 10 years. Like no one knows. So get curious. They got curious about the recipe. What's working, what isn't working, what's changing, what's staying the same, just getting really, really curious. And that curiosity meant you can be really open to, maybe there might be a huge improvement we can make. Or maybe it's just a little marginal gain. Let's be open, let's be curious that we might reap both. Because things are happening so fast, maybe we will try this one new AI app and it's going to boom, massively improve maybe it won't. So the crew people laughed at them because they spent less time on the water rowing and they spent a bit more time on the riverbank going, what's working, what isn't working, what are we going to go do differently in the future? And again, I love that because I think when we get busy, when change is happening so quickly, we just kind of go, do.
Yeah.
So it's like, even if it's 5 minutes a day, whoa, okay, what's worked, what hasn't, what am I going to do in the future? And getting curious.
And I think that's a really prevalent approach to AI at the moment. It's like, don't just stand there, do something. It feels like, I don't know what I need to do, but I need to do something.
Yeah, and then you can kind of go, was that useful? Was that not useful? And as I say, it's that like, no one knows. Don't be fooled that I spend a lot of my time at conferences. Do a lot of keynote speaking, and there's lots of AI slots where people kind of wander on, saying this is how it's going to unfold. It's like, you don't know that. I will take that as input. I will absolutely take that as data and an opinion, but I need to keep my curiosity.
Yeah, I like that. And it's uncomfortable not knowing, right? We like certainty.
There's that famous, again, we covered this in the MSc I've just done, where they had, I'm going to get the setup slightly wrong. It was something like they had two groups of people, and one lot knew that they were going to have an electric shock every 30 seconds, and one group didn't know, but it was a much less strong electric shock. And in terms of their physiological responses, the folks who knew, even though it was a much more unpleasant, they fared much better. We hate not knowing. We hate not knowing because we can't plan for it. And so control the controllables, get yourself a support team of who you can talk this stuff through, get curious.
So Alfredo, you know what goes on with agents. You're kind of you're in their world. How does this apply to an agency looking at the opportunity and threat of AI?
I mean, it applies to them in every conceivable way. I think if nothing else, if an agent takes nothing away from all of this really juicy conversation, it goes with the title of the book. Will it make the boat go faster? And I think that if you wanted a sort of a hack, as much as I hate that word, ask yourself that, or ask the person that's asked to have a meeting with you about their new AI app that's going to revolutionize and solve all your problems, is ask that question. Will it make the boat go faster? And obviously that has follow-on questions like how and why. And I think the be curious element that Harriet was talking about, the we don't know element, I think that's huge as well. It's in a world of social media where anybody, including me, can go on and say whatever we want. There's a lot of people saying things that they have no clue about, and there's some people that are better educated. So I think that I would get my journalistic background on there and sort of say, who says? I would ask that question, right? I heard that is what your colleague is telling you. Apparently, your colleague is telling you, and I would start with who says who. If it's is an exec from Google, okay, maybe I'll listen. If it's a YouTuber or something, maybe not. And I think that is so useful. But will it make the boat go faster? Wow, what a way of thinking about it.
This has been fascinating. Thanks, Harriet. It's made me definitely gonna go out and buy the third edition of the book as soon as it comes out. But if there's a message you can leave business owners, estate agents, agencies in Spain with that sort of encapsulates all this, what would you say to them?
Well, I guess, make sure you've got your support crew. It's hard being a leader, right? It's hard. Everyone's looking to you unconsciously or consciously, like, what's the answer here? And it's like, I don't know. So, who is your support team that you can bounce ideas around with or, get support from? So yeah, there's that piece. But I think, and it's going to sound very cheesy, but the reason we called the book, Will It Make the Boat Go Faster, is if in doubt, that's the kind of go-to phrase, like, well, hang on, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Well, what do I need to do next? Will it make the boat go faster? I'm feeling scared. Well, will it make the boat go faster? I haven't got all the answers. Sure, of course you don't. But let's just, what do you think might make the boat go faster? So I think it's that phrase.
Brilliant. Thank you. That was a fantastic conversation. Thanks, Harriet. Great,
super fun. Thanks for having me on.
Great insights for our audience. The book, Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? The third edition is out on the 18th of June. We'll pop a link in the show notes about where to buy that. I can honestly say it's the best business book I've ever read.
Thank you, Martin.
Yeah, it's just one of the ones that stuck. And the combination of your humor and your background in management consulting and the Olympic team just makes it one of those books you can't put down.
Good. Brilliant. That's wonderful to hear.
Thanks, Harriet. Really appreciate your time.
Absolute pleasure.
That's I really enjoyed getting a completely outside perspective on what's going on in this AI space now. Harriet herself would admit she knows next to nothing about AI, but the logic and the kind of way of thinking about change is universal, and this is just another change, right?
Quite often you have to add to the will it make the boat go faster, or will it make any difference whatsoever? Is it a plus? And that's where just because it can doesn't mean you should sort of comes into it. I think it's too big a topic to get out to ignore. I don't know what how do you think, as a sort of takeaway from this first episode, what do you think the agents should be thinking as a result of it?
As leaders, it's easy for us not to take that seriously because we have the desire and we already believe. So I think the idea of making sure the team is on the same page is fundamental. And as I'm sure we'll touch on later, the person that's most useful in terms of automating current processes is the person in your team who feels most at risk and most threatened by that automation. And I think unless you're on the same team, you're going to have silent saboteurs in your business. So building belief and desire isn't a nice to have. It's not a touchy-feely thing. It's this won't work unless you can genuinely build belief and desire. And I think we gloss over that part too quickly and too easily as leaders. And I'm pointing the finger at myself here. I've done that. I love the idea of the evidence wall to support that belief and desire. Because like you've said, Alfredo, there's so much noise on TikTok or YouTube and Claude this and ChatGPT that and this new tool and this is killing the creative industry and this is killing the financial industry. There's so much negativity and noise that unless we have our own evidence wall of why this is even possible, why this is even a possibility that we will succeed, I think we have to do that as leaders for ourselves and our teams. I love these two lenses of asking the question, what's the useful? We're not going to win every time. We're not going to win every deal. We're not going to close every lead. What's the useful? How do we learn from this? That's a useful perspective on a game that we can't win 100% of the time.
And I think I would add to that you don't have to be first. You just have to have your eyes open, though. You can't just go and close the door. It doesn't mean you got to be first through it.
Yeah, very true. Well, that makes me think about some of the comments I've read about Mike Del Pret's AI conference last week called Further. The feedback from the delegates was basically, we're in the 1993 era of the internet. We've no idea. And anybody that tells you that they know what they're doing is making it up or selling you something, probably both. But also doing nothing is another kind of losing strategy. So we can't ignore this thing. Like we've said, the AI genie is out of the bottle. We're just not sure what to do with it yet. So the feedback from Mike's conference was the agents who are sort of making progress here, they're not asking which tool should I be using. They're actually asking, will it make the boat go faster? Question, what problem am I trying to solve? And what does my client need from me? What do my buyers need from me? So I think underlying it all in real estate is the knowledge and the belief that this is a very human business. The people buying a property from you, they don't want to buy it from an AI bot. They want the relationship. They want the trust. It's not a purchase. It's not a transaction they're doing frequently. And they need you to give them that confidence and feel good factor. And nobody's talking about AI doing that anytime soon because we're humans and we want to interact with humans.
I think that's a great way to segue to what we have coming up in the next episodes. At the moment we're looking at 8 or 9 episodes that may get extended. I imagine people listening to this may have something to contribute, in which case reach out to us. And if you're doing something cool with AI in your company, or you're offering a service that is really making the boat go faster, then reach out to us and we'll incorporate this into our conversation. But the forthcoming episodes, what we're looking to deal with is some of it offering a bit of balance of both stories. So there are a few people that don't really think this is a good idea at all, and that really, at least on certain topics to do with sales and follow-ups, We're gonna have a few episodes where we're speaking to agents, in some cases with their supplier of AI services, to talk about what they're doing and trying to split it into admin, into sales, and into marketing. How are they using it? So these will be current real test cases. We're not going to go into the nitty gritty of which app they're using and how much it costs and all that, but really just the emotional, the mental part of it. Is it working? Are you excited about it? Why are you excited about it? And what were you worried about? And what would be your advice to other agents? This is going to be almost like a group therapy thing. And the reason we're not going to go too much into specifics about apps and stuff like that is because, as you said, it changes every 5 minutes. It's changed. So really, it's more to get the mindset around it. And hopefully at the end of all of this, you'll have a healthy outlook on the topic.
It's while we were speaking with Harriet, it made me think of the early days of Kyero, when we were selling online advertising to agencies at the time that didn't even have an email address. And the question was, well, why would I bother? I mean, I stick flyers underneath windscreens. People walk into my shop. I don't really want them to contact me via email or whatever. You know, if they're not right here in my shop so I can sell them something, what use are they to me? And of course, things have changed quite a lot over the last 25 years. And it feels like we're at that moment. We don't really know what's going to happen, but I think people generally agree it's a huge change that we need to take seriously.